The content of the following program, including all statements from the hosts and guests, is to provide general information and commentary about the law. Under no circumstances does any statement made by the host or guest to a caller or listener constitute legal advice or the formation of an attorney-client relationship, and the material from this program shall not be viewed as substitute for a personal consultation with an attorney. Now, prepare yourself to be informed and entertained by Gus Bravo and Neil Kotze, two AV-rated trial lawyers who have been practicing law for a combined total of nearly 40 years. For the next 30 minutes, they will share their insight and commentary on important legal issues affecting all of us.
Two young alligators grew up together in the Everglades, and when they got old enough to be able to actually eat people, they reached an agreement that they would only eat lawyers. Now, a year later, the two alligators meet again, and one is very fat, and the other one's very thin. And the thin alligator looks at the fat alligator and says, "Why are you so much bigger than me? Are you only eating lawyers?" And the big alligator says, "Yes, I'm only eating lawyers. What about you?" The thin alligator says, "I'm only eating lawyers." So the fat alligator turns to his buddy and he says, "Well, tell me, how do you catch your lawyers?" And the thin alligator says, "Well, I go over to an area where there's a law firm by the swamp, and I wait under a BMW, and as soon as a lawyer steps out, I grab him, I shake the crap out of him, and then I eat him." And the big alligator says, "Ha ha, that's the problem. Once you shake the crap out of a lawyer, all that's left is lips and a briefcase." Welcome to Attorney Confidential. I'm Neil Kotze.
And I'm Gus Bravo. That one, not only I got, but I got it. You can see my face a little earlier than normal.
You knew where it was going.
I'm more rejuvenated now since we obviously avoided that dreaded Hurricane Erica that became absolutely
and
nothing.
It's good that we didn't have a hurricane, but it's bad in some ways that a lot of people are going to react that, oh, okay, it's not that bad, don't follow the cones because it's not coming, and the next time it's like the sky is falling.
Right.
The next time there really is a hurricane, people don't prepare, and then you have problems. So,
and look, it's you have to take these things seriously. It goes without saying. Those of us who've lived down here long enough, who remember Andrew, and then the 2004 hurricane season when we had Charlie, Gene, Francis. I forget which ones actually hit South Florida. But then, of course, 2005, we had Katrina and Wilma. I mean, these were all storms that in various degrees caused a lot of damage and also taught us many lessons about insurance and really what having insurance means and obviously how insurance companies can kind of, let's just say, do things where they're in the business of collecting premiums and not necessarily paying out claims.
Yeah, they are for-profit companies. Insurance companies are not for-profit.
I say that not as someone who routinely sues insurance companies, but we've worked both sides of the coin. And I think one of the concerns, though, is something to keep in mind. Remember after, I think it was Wilma in 2005, because of and not just Wilma, but obviously the 2004 hurricane season when they had all those hurricanes.
Charlie, Francis, Gene.
And then they had the one...
And Ivan.
Ivan in the Panhandle, where the insurance companies took a big hit, and a lot of them got out of Dodge, so to speak. And so that's when Citizens, the insurance or insurer of last resort, which was the state insurance company, came in and kind of started handling a lot of these claims. Well, apparently now... most of these Citizens claims or policies that Citizens had have now gone on to new insurance companies. The problem is new insurance companies, companies that are just starting out, barely have a name on the door, and in theory, if there's a claim to be made, especially a hurricane, you're going to have a lot of claims. Are they going to have the wherewithal to actually pay on those claims? Supposedly, that's what the Department of Insurance is for, but remains to be seen.
And we still have, hurricane season doesn't end until November.
There's Fred.
So, right
around the corner. And but what's funny, it shows you, because obviously it goes in alphabetical order, Wilma, Wilma hit end of October.
That's right.
On your birthday, right?
That's right. Wilma hit on my birthday, yes. I
think it's very apropos, if you ask me.
Moved into the new house. We decided to move into the new house in Miami Shores on my birthday, and first thing we do is get the truck unpacked and put up the shutters.
Welcome home.
Yeah, welcome home. Welcome to South Florida from North Carolina.
And for those of you just tuning in and listening to us for the first time, we always lead off our show with a joke. Most of the time it's funny, and we always try to conclude our show with a deep thought. And for those of you who have been following us since day one, I think your parents, I know my parents have not, I know my wife has not, hopefully Clarice has been loyal, but so for those few of you that have been following us since day one, we the whole idea came from Jim Valvano. I just wanted to kind of explain for those folks who are new, is that he gave this famous ESPY speech. When I'll let you explain.
You can take if you want.
No, you say it so well.
The speech that Jim Valvano gave as he was accepting the ESPY was that you should try to do three things every day. You should try to laugh, at least laugh once every day. You should try to engage in deep thought on one issue at least every day. And if possible, you should be brought to tears on something at least once every day.
I don't think we've brought anyone to tears
I hope,
yet.
I mean,
Hopefully
sometimes
not.
tears can be a form of laughter, but I think just something that makes you that emotional. Something, your emotions should be stirred up. And if you can do all three of those in a day, that's a pretty good day.
It's a great day.
It's a great day.
If you do one of two of those
one
things,
of those is a good day.
So our show strives to, we start off with a joke and we always conclude with a deep thought. In between, we engage.
Are you
in
about to make me cry? Is there something that you're not telling me?
No, not on the air, please. Basketball season hasn't started yet,
Right.
so we don't have
that's
that.
why I'm actually wearing my shorts, my polo with my Tar Heel Carolina.
Yeah, that's
Tar
exactly
Heel
why,
logo on
right?
it. Yeah. Well, actually, football now because we start on Thursday. No, it's because I forgot to bring another shirt. Yes, I know.
So look, we try to talk about the law and try to have some fun with it, but also be serious with it, and just kind of whichever your views don't necessarily always align with mine, which is good. But for those of you who want to call
there's
in,
right and there's wrong.
I'll give you that one.
Right.
For those of you who want to call in and join in, it's 888-565-1470. We'll try to answer any legal questions you may have, but otherwise, you're just going to hear us going back and forth about some interesting legal topics.
And we've had some callers, and we've had some very interesting callers. And if people want to talk, for example, about hurricane issues, because Fred's around the corner. I don't know if it's coming to South Florida. I don't think we're in the 12-day cone yet, but the cone, as my daughter would say from watching the movie Up, it's the cone of shame.
I love that movie.
I do not like the cone of shame.
I was hiding under the house because I love you. Sorry, we can keep quoting
and not
these
to make
movies.
fun. I mean, I have some friends that are meteorologists. I had the pleasure of meeting Max Mayfield once, and those guys got it tough. I mean,
You're really going to name drop? My wife loves Max Mayfield,
he is
by
phenomenal,
the way.
and what a
Because
great
he's
guy.
just got such a older kind of grandfatherly, all shucks, nice guy look to him. You've met him?
Yep, we were going to use him as an expert witness in that insurance case. I think we've talked about it a few times on the show. He was unavailable, and we had a great couple of others. I won't go through names there, but we had some others.
You're not going to name drop anymore?
Right.
Some people from the Weather Channel.
Well, some people are famous. I don't think they mind if you name drop. Other people probably don't want to be named.
So, we obviously we have the hurricane. In hurricane season, we're just getting into the thick of things. So, folks, the one advice I would tell you is you got to make sure your premiums are up to date. Pick up the phone, call your insurance agent or your broker, and find out what coverages you do have and do not have. Particularly those of you who live in flood zones, it's important to make sure that you have flood coverage. It might be too late to get that coverage for this period around, but at least it's good to know.
I think you have to only within a certain period of the warning. I mean, you can get the coverage until Fred becomes or a subsequent hurricane gets close enough.
Right. And look, I mean, and rain is a huge thing. I mean, what most of us think of the hurricane as the wind and that type of phenomenon, but as we know, in handling insurance claims and hurricane-related claims, it's usually the rain, the water, the flood.
Well, the driving rain causes damage too, because with a hurricane, it's not that the wind is blowing; it's what the wind is blowing. And so, not the driving rain, but other things that
Your
the wind
face
blows around.
when you said that, you had such pleasure out of it.
No.
All right, so you have, we can move on from insurance. I know you have another interesting legal topic, ironically enough, and I want to set it up for our producer because I get some complaints that I jump too quickly into the pictures. Refrain from me giving your thought that you wanted to go. I paused for a reason. So we're going to talk about Target and the Target lawsuits, and I know that it's been an interesting topic as of late,
Oh,
and we have a
that's a
very
great
good.
picture.
Isn't that a great picture?
Oh my gosh, it's the lawsuit's coming right at target.
Go ahead
I
and
mean,
describe it for those listeners. Not
it is a bullseye with a arrow that has lawsuits on it, right in the bullseye, or a dart, whichever one you want to call it. Maybe it's
right.
a little more like a
So
dart. but-
this is a nice segue to the Target lawsuits.
Yeah, and we had talked last week, and I think in prior weeks we had mentioned the personal identity issue with Target that they had. Well, this is completely different now. Target, it actually didn't rise to the level of a lawsuit. There were claims against Target through the EEOC.
You mean I got that
Equal
picture for
Employment.
all for naught?
Well, it could have led to a lawsuit.
Are you telling me it's premature?
I wasn't going there, although the thought had entered my mind. The Target was actually required now to pay a $2.8 million settlement as a result of an employment dispute related to applicants based on race and gender. And it was an interesting settlement because it brings around an area of the law that people are less familiar with. We all know about discriminatory treatment. Somebody is actually discriminated against because of their race, and the person doing the discrimination is doing it because of the race. They are firing someone because they're black or because they're Asian or because they're Jewish, and you can make that connection. We also have an area under the law called discriminatory impact, and that means that the intent might not be there, but your actions have a discriminatory impact or a disparate impact against that
I'm sorry.
minority. I know I've been pronouncing it disparate, and you've been giving me a hard time.
Yeah, you corrected it. I was hoping you were going to say it the way you want to say it.
That's why I've been using the word discriminatory.
Yes.
Disparate. I was taught disparate, and Gus has been correcting me that it's disparate.
Well, because how do you say disparaging? Disparaging?
disparaging.
All right. Well,
It's like this lawsuit and that lawsuit. It's the same thing. But back to discriminatory or disparate impact. What Target was found is they had a pre-employment screening test, and the EEOC did not go into the details as to why the test had this discriminatory impact. But one of the tests was psychologically related, and they said that a psychological type exam might discriminate against people with disabilities because they might not perform as well on the test. And the test itself wasn't necessarily related to any job requirement or job function. So just to become a member of Target, and I don't want to belittle Target, it's a large company, but to work as a cashier at Target, I don't think that you need to be passing a certain psychological examination. There are certainly parts of that job that are difficult, but you don't want to necessarily discriminate.
does Target sell guns?
I don't believe Target sells guns.
Well, if they did, obviously the person that's working
Well,
that
that's a whole
cash
separate
register.
issue we might get into on a different show, but because that is, you do want psychological screening, I think.
You
there.
think?
Yeah. As we've seen, unfortunately, in the news
Yeah.
more too often over the last several months and throughout history, really. But the psychological
A
test.
well-trained militia is very, very important.
Well, yeah, no. I mean, look. I mean, there's the right to bear arms is about as important as the right to arm bears, right? I mean, neither one really makes a lot of sense if it's not followed right. The other argument was, I mean, with assault weapons and the types of weapons that people want to keep, and boy, we've transitioned all of a sudden from employment to guns.
Someone's random here. I don't know who it is.
I think random.
I
It's the way
know. I planted to see.
It's the way my brain works. And we can get to that maybe at the second half.
Yeah.
But the Target lawsuit was interesting, and so it's important that
What kind of tests?
the EEOC really didn't get into the details of the
You
types
said
of tests.
psychological
There was
tests?
psychological testing, and then there was other types of testing.
But
that
isn't there,
apparently,
like, can you argue if I'm Target saying, look, there's got to be a minimum psych test. I want to make sure I don't have crazy people working for us.
that
Isn't that
apparently
something
they were
within the
unable to
employer's-
justify. Well, Target tried, but the EEOC said no. You can't have medical pre-screening, and without knowing what the test was, it's really hard to. And I've been trying to find anything more detailed off Wikipedia that describes it. But no, I've read articles. The EEOC
Right.
has not published its formal statement yet. So when that comes
Well,
out, we
if
may
you're an
talk on
employee
a-
of Target, and you can want to call us in and talk about what kind of tests and what kind of metrics you had to pass and what kind of interviews you had to undertake in order to work there. 888-565-1470. Look, we've reached the halfway point. I think the second half we'll continue talking about Target, maybe talk about guns, and also talk about the California death penalty case.
Right.
That's kind of a heated topic now. You're listening to Attorney Confidential with Gus and Neil. We'll be right back after this break.
Attorney Confidential with Gus and Neil is being brought to you by the law offices of Neil D. Kodzing and Bravo Law. Bravo Law is a business litigation firm known for providing common sense solutions to small businesses and individuals throughout South Florida. Mr. Bravo is rated AV by Martindale Hubble and Superb by ABVO, the highest ratings available from these two entities. The law offices of Neil D. Kotze is a litigation boutique with offices in Broward and Miami-Dade counties. Mr. Kotze is a veteran trial lawyer with nearly 25 years of jury trial experience. He is also a two-time recipient of the South Florida Daily Business Review's Most Effective Lawyer Award, a recipient of numerous awards for providing pro bono legal services, and has been recognized by the National Law Council. Call our office, 786-464-0841 or 954-790-6711 and get informed. You're listening to Attorney Confidential with Gus and Neil. If you have a comment, question, or just want to contribute to the conversation, call the show at 888-565-1470 and share your thoughts on what's going on. Now, back to Gus and Neil for more Attorney Confidential.
And we're back with Attorney Confidential with Gus and Neil. Neil, we were talking about the Target case. It's more of a theory. I don't know. I mean, look, there's a Target picture up there. I think Target sells guns, but even if they didn't, even if they don't have a sporting goods gun department, they certainly
Shouldn't an employer have a right to pre-screen its employees psychologically?
I mean, look, in light of the shootings that I think you touched upon it earlier, the camera, the news camera person and the reporter in Virginia, it's things in the workplace now have escalated to new heights. I mean, I remember when I started working at the big firms, you and I, we still do have the keypad, right, to get in, and that was in response to some threats. And I think now what we realize is there's really very few, unfortunately, safe places around. I mean, look, a movie theater is no longer safe.
And the other thing is, I'm not a big believer in today the discriminatory or disparate impact analysis.
Disparate
impact. Look, you don't want people discriminating. I mean, that's the law. We don't want people in their hiring and firing decision to discriminate. But if it's not intentional, if they designed a test and for whatever reason, I don't know what the questions were on the test, they might have been cultural in such a way that apparently African Americans, Asians, and women scored lower than other groups. And that's not a statement on intelligence. It's not a statement.
This wasn't lower entry-level positions,
This
right?
was for senior management positions.
Okay.
They could be culturally worded questions that people just react to differently. It might have been that the multiple choice was harder to differentiate because
we don't know what kind of psychological test.
Right. It has nothing to do with it. I mean, no statements on intelligence or anything like that.
And to the extent you perceive those statements to be made by any host on the show, the law office of Neil D. Kotze, who I may say got a much longer plug during the break point than Bravo Law, is the one that initiated
age before beauty,
something along those lines. But go ahead.
But with disparate impact, it's a purely statistical analysis. So if you can look at a company and say that in your city, the city itself is 30% African American, 20% Asian, and 50% white. Yet you're hiring, and you look at the company, and it's 80% white, 5% Asian, and 15% African American.
Right.
Does that mean that they are discriminating? I don't know, but you should be able to prove it through actual discriminatory treatment actions.
Sure.
As opposed to saying that whatever entry test they have has an impact.
And I think this gets into an interesting point about you said earlier, we all agree with certain truisms. We don't want companies discriminating based on race, ethnicity, and all those things.
We represent people who are suing companies for that very reason.
But at the same time, companies should be allowed to set certain parameters, certain, I don't call it barriers, but certain thresholds, certain requirements, factors that they want that in the past have proven to make a more successful employee, worker. And certainly now when we're talking about psychological evaluations, we're talking about safety, which, look, crazy is crazy. I don't care what color, gender, skin. I mean, it's the person in the Virginia shootings, in my opinion, use race as just a pretext because that person's crazy. Just like the kid from South Carolina who went to the church and killed those 9 African Americans. It's just crazy. They use these other reasons as a pretext, as an excuse. So we want in some ways to empower companies and employers to at least have some tools available to them to identify, weed out these extremes.
Right. I mean, think of the level. I think of the level of psychological analysis we do in selecting a jury. And these are people that we're only going to be with for whether it be 2 days or 2 weeks or sometimes 2 months or longer in a really big trial. And from back representing the tobacco industry, if I could tell you stories about how much psychological analysis goes into selecting that group of 12 people, and yet we're not going to let an employer who has full-time employees, hopefully for a long period of time,
we're talking
do
about
some sort of psychological
upper management
analysis.
folks. We're not talking about.
But these are the people who are running the company, so you even want them to be. You want to, if you have a test that you think is going to help you weed out the wheat from the chaff, and it's going to help you for your company meet your company's goals, and it happens to have a statistical impact. Now, look, I mean, there's certain questions we could come up with. I'm sure we would all figure out that those are intentionally put in there to separate out races or other minorities. But the EEOC couldn't find any of that.
The point is, just because there's a disparate result doesn't necessarily make the method you got there discriminatory. And I think, I mean, this is clearly a topic we can talk a lot at length about, but I want to get to the next topic, which is the California death penalty case, which is a completely different, unrelated segue. Although I would argue, you could argue that actually this is the end result of crazy. And so California now, there's a case that's now in appeal that they were hearing today, arguments, the Ninth Circuit, that a lower court judge, a district court judge, had declared the California death penalty unconstitutional. And what's interesting about it is, the standard is cruel and unusual punishment. Okay, and I believe, and here's a picture of we have up here is obviously the gurney where they put in the person that be executed.
I actually watched The Green Mile last night. So
there you go, very apropos. And I believe it's through injection. So they're not attacking the method of killing somebody, but rather the judge attacked the whole system itself, saying the system is dysfunctional because it literally, and to quote, he said, it amounts to life in prison with the remote possibility of death. What happens is since 1978, there have been 900 prisoners convicted to death. Okay, of those, only 13 have been executed. The rest are all waiting through the whole legal appellate process and whatnot. Wait up to 25, 30 years for your day to come. And so the judge, which is an interesting argument, said the system itself is dysfunctional. And so the system itself is unconstitutional. Because it's kind of like, I guess maybe the analogy I would use if of firing a death squad and stuff, and they have you stand up against the tree, so to speak, blindfold, and they keep shooting and the gun doesn't go off. And you're just kind of waiting, and you're waiting, right? And some of these guys are waiting 25 years, although some would argue, listen, I preferred life prison with the remote possibility of death rather than...
But that's a terrible... I mean, but the issue there is...
Were you going to say it's a terrible analogy?
Yeah.
Really?
I stopped myself.
Yes.
I stopped myself.
I thought that was a very good analogy on the fly, but let's not argue about analogies. But go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, at least with the people on death row, they get plenty of notice before the bullets start flying. As opposed to just sitting there in rapid fire, but that's okay. As lawyers, and when you do a lot of closing arguments, you always are thinking
you'll attack
of
my analogy. I would come up with something better.
That's okay.
Why don't you come up with an analogy?
Well,
you wait for that. Yeah, there you go. While we wait for that,
deer in the headlights. Look,
but what's interesting about this exactly is that it's a different type of challenge, and I think this issue it's attacking the system itself. And I think that's got some legs to it. I mean, I think that's something that ultimately we will see the U.S. Supreme Court may see take it up on some type of appeal, because really most systems, that's how they work, right? It drags on, it's a drain on the legal system. These guys are getting appeals after appeals after appeals over all. They manipulate. Some would say manipulate the system. But I thought it's interesting because look, I mean, the death penalty. I mean, California is very liberal about it. So, of course, Texas, there's a sheriff out in Texas. I forget who his name is. He actually gives the prisoners, wear pink instead of orange. and he puts them out in tents and no AC. And his logic, my father loves this, he says, our troops are out there in Afghanistan in tents, hot, no AC. Why should the convicts get any better treatment? Now, needless to say, my old man swings a little bit to the right, so
I like your dad.
So that you'll appreciate.
Like
but yeah,
your dad.
that's something a case to keep an eye on, because I think it's going to be the next major challenge to the death penalty. And we just got our 2-minute warning. You probably, I don't know if you have a couple of things you want to go through real quickly, rapid fire legal news, or you want to do the takeaway?
One of the things I just came across a great story you had mentioned on a previous show about Chief Justice John Roberts serving jury duty.
I don't like this one at all.
Yeah, I know.
Go ahead.
But Roberts is not going to be recognized by a lot of people. There are a lot of people who would see John Roberts in the street and not know who he is. But to show the importance of jury duty, and we've talked a lot about this on this show and how it's your civic duty, George Bush, the younger of the two former presidents, was summoned for jury duty 3 weeks ago in Texas, and he went. And the judge looked at the crowd, looked at the former president, and he looked at everybody and he says, "For those of you that are planning on giving me an excuse as to why you cannot sit on this jury, I want you to look right there and you see the former president of the United States, and you better have a darn good excuse if he is able to come here and sit in my courtroom to sit on a jury."
If he's able to get away from his busy schedule.
And I just think it set a good example. So anyway,
No,
on that note,
I agree. All right, so we've now come to the end of the show, but we have the quote of the day. And I'm repeating the author because I really like this guy. If you ever get a chance, do a little Wikipedia search, Google search on Ambrose Bierce. He is the author of the Devil's Dictionary. And this week, I'm quoting Ambrose on the following. When he defined acquaintance as follows: a person whom we know well enough to borrow from, but not well enough to lend to. A degree of friendship called slight when its object is poor or obscure, and intimate when he is rich or famous.
I like that.
Ambrose Bierce, author of Devil's Dictionary. I have a lot more quotes from that guy, and I'm sure we'll be repeating it. Well, this concludes Attorney Confidential with Gus and Neil. Emphasis on Gus.
Good night, everybody.
You have been listening to Attorney Confidential with Gus Bravo and Neil Kotze, two rated AV trial attorneys with over 40 years of experience. Tune in next week for another episode of entertainment, insight, and just plain fun. That's Monday, 6 p.m. on WNN 1470 AM. See you next Monday for more Attorney Confidential. The opinions expressed on the